Good morning. So my name is Praphul, and this is where I come from. This is the university that I teach in, and this is the Center of Excellence in AI and Decentralized Technologies. The focus area of my COE, we work in 3 different domains. The first one is education, and I will be spending most of my time today here talking about education and upskilling and learning and development, what we have learned, and what we think are good policy recommendations to discuss today as we move towards the age of AI. Our work in education primarily focus on the application of artificial intelligence to build something we call a teacher co-pilot, right? And while there is significant work happening around the world on making personalized AI tutors for students, our view is that the teacher is going to be critical going forward. So our focus is on building a teacher co-pilot which can help professors and educators actually help students learn better. I'll spend quite a bit of time talking about what we have learned as we have taken the journey of building a AI co-pilot and also incorporating AI in the classroom in the university setting. What are the lessons learned, what to do, what not to do. We have discussed this with other universities, and we continue to kind of work towards helping regulators form these policies. Our second area of focus, which I will not talk about too much, is energy. And this is something that we realize is going to become increasingly important as we move towards a world where energy is no longer produced in centralized units, but because of renewable energy coming in, the grid now must deal with a situation where there are multiple energy producers and consumers in a distributed setting. Our third area of focus is environment. Here we are primarily relying on satellite imaging to be able to understand the natural capital of any square piece of land that exists on Earth. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Given the context of this conference, I'm going to spend most of the time on the education part, right? One thing that we have realized across all 3 projects is that the artificial intelligence that we have seen today is scary good. It is it's increasingly getting better, right? And just to give you the context, today's AI is better than 99% of humans when it comes to an IQ test. When it comes to college admissions in the US, it does better than 97% of all student applications. It scores greater than 90% on the US bar exam for becoming a lawyer. And it scores more than 80% on the US medical licensing test which you must take to become a doctor. And this is the world that we must prepare our next generation for. Right? And this is a huge challenge, especially for us at the university, as to what do we teach, how do we teach it, and how do we adapt to a world where every single student has this thing in their hand which has AI built in. And this has been multiple discussions over the last 2-3 years have helped us come up with what we think we should be doing. And I will take the opportunity today to share that with you. Right? Now, before we get into the recommendations, I also want to take a look back as to how did we get here. And if you take a moment to think about it, this is not that old. 1940s and 1950s, we did not even have digital computers. So in less than 100 years, we are staring at a phase where we have created a technology or an intelligence which is better than 90% of us in terms of its intellectual capabilities. Just take a moment to think about the implications of that statement. We have created a technology or intelligence which is greater than 90% of us. Right? The other thing to realize about artificial intelligence is that the progress in this field is not linear. It's, it's very hard to say what will happen in 2026 or 2027. But if you take a slightly longer perspective, you can start to make predictions as to what's going to happen. And this graph is basically showing that there are certain technologies, for example, if you look at reading comprehension, which is the ability to read something in natural language and being able to understand what this is. For the longest time, right up till about 2016, the ability of artificial intelligence to read and understand something was close to zero. But today, because of the innovation, it has shot up to be better than humans. So the point I'm making is that the speed at which this technology evolves is not only fast, it is unpredictable. It is non-linear. And that's something that we are seeing, that not only is this AI good, but it keeps getting better, right? The other thing to realize about this technology is that something fundamentally changed in November 2022. Right? For those of you who have used this technology, it's called ChatGPT. Something fundamentally changed. And to understand what changed, right? Artificial intelligence as a technology has been around for now 3 decades. And we have seen multiple innovations. But what fundamentally changed in November 2022 was that one model could do many things. Prior to 2022, the dominant industry trend was that you had a problem, you collected the data, you put some compute behind it, and you solved the problem. That was the traditional way artificial intelligence and machine learning and data science was done. What changed in November 2022 was the idea of something called a foundation model. What that meant was one model could do many, many, many things. As you made this model larger, as you made this model more powerful, as you threw more and more data at this single model, that same model could do many, many things. Right? And that really was the foundational thing that changed, that with one model we could do many things. Now, as I said, we have been thinking about this a lot. What does this mean for today's workforce and students and education? Okay. And the way we have come up with this framework to have this discussion inside the university and with policymakers is to say that this is not a black box. And it will be a mistake to think of everything as one single monolithic set of skills that you need to teach students and workforce. Rather, it is better to think of this in layers, right? So if you start at the bottom, right, which we say layer 1, which we think every single individual should have. This is about AI literacy, foundational understanding or basic understanding of what AI is, what it can do, what it cannot do, and to be able to understand that this technology makes mistakes and be able to use it knowing that it sometimes makes mistakes. Right? That's what we call AI literacy. The second thing that we talk about, one layer above this, a slightly higher set of skills, is AI tools usage. And here we are saying that to use this technology, you need to have a certain number of skills, not to build this technology, but to use this technology. And those things are typically what are now being called prompt engineering, which basically means being able to write in natural language, primarily English today, but more languages as we move forward, being able to express in a natural language what is it that you want AI to do, right? And that's what we call AI tool usage. The third layer on top of that is what we call AI integration. And this is where we believe the domain knowledge of the experts who are going to use this technology becomes very, very important. Being able to say, these are the capabilities of AI. How do I integrate these technologies and tools into my work, right? And that is what is called AI integration. Being able to understand that here are the set of AI tools and technologies available, and this is the best way to integrate it into my workflow or to become more productive or become more efficient. And lastly is AI research and development. This is where we kind of say, okay, we want to build new AI from scratch, right? This is about designing, building, and extending the AI state of art from a technological perspective, okay? So that was the key background setting I wanted to do before I kind of move into what we have learned about playing at the intersection of AI and education, right? And my objective was to share with you the policy recommendations that we have started to implement at the university-wide setting where I teach. And I'm also a mentor at TekFrameworks, which is an AI consulting firm, where we have started to talk about and discuss these policy recommendations with many other stakeholders. Today's we will focus primarily on what does this mean for jobs, what does this mean for work, what does this mean for learning and development, okay? All right, so let's jump into it. The big picture of the impact of AI is this: 89 million jobs will be eliminated worldwide because of AI, right? But if you look only at this picture, it's half the picture. The other half of the picture is 63 million jobs will be created because of AI. So the question that you need to ask is, how do we move our workforce from the left to the right? Right? And the way to think about this is, in my view, to think about three different aspects of this problem. The first is, how do we upskill today's workforce? The second aspect is, how do we change the workforce which is about to enter the market, the labor market, the people who are in universities and colleges today? And third is, how do we prepare our school-going children, our students who are going to schools for this world? And it turns out that the answers are different in each case, right? So let's start with the first one. The first one is people who are part of the workforce today, right? Now, this is from World Economic Forum, the Future of Work report, that 44% of the skills will be disrupted by 2027, right? So in each of these three cases, what I would do is I will go through three policy recommendations for today's workforce, starting with this slide, three policy recommendations for university students, and three policy recommendations for school students, right? And then I'll wrap up. Okay, so let's start with today's workforce. Today's workforce is in dire need of AI upskilling, okay? So the first thing that we are recommending here has actually got nothing to do with AI per se. The first thing that we are recommending here is that creating a digital platform where the credentials of somebody who has been upskilled in different technologies can be shared across universities, across employers, and across evaluating agencies. That's the first thing that we are talking about, digital credentials. How does somebody prove that they have gone through an upskilling experience? Might seem very simple, eminently doable, but it turns out that something like this really puts in place a framework for labor mobility between different employers and between universities and employers. So that's the first recommendation. The second recommendation is making sure that you help or co-fund the private, and the public sector co-funds the private sector by offering incentives like tax credits or partly paid apprenticeships. And this is something that Singapore has done very well. So if you look at the Singapore Skill Trust program, they have done this fairly well. So being able to fund or co-fund the upskilling programs of current employee workforce. The third policy recommendation is that when it comes to assessing the skills of today's workforce in the field of AI, it is important to make sure that we evaluate them both using AI as well as using humans. And this is something that we learned very, very quickly when we started working at the intersection of AI and education. And let me share a story. What was happening 2 years ago in the university is suddenly that the exams that we were conducting, or the assignments that we were giving, or the homework that we were giving, the scores of those assignments suddenly started shooting up, right? Everybody seemed to be doing exceedingly well. All students were doing exceedingly well in the assignments. And of course, what had happened was that everybody was using ChatGPT to submit their assignments and homeworks, right? So we very quickly figured out that the way we do evaluation has to completely change. So we moved a lot of focus on verbal evaluations, vivas, face-to-face interviews. What in turn that meant was that the teaching load of the faculty increased. And as the teaching load of the faculty increased, we were not able to do many of the things that we wanted, which led us to do a second innovation, which says, how do you put a place in AI-based system to automatically evaluate students' answer sheets? Right? So if you give a question paper and let students write, now can you use AI to automate it? So the balance has changed, right? We are using Vivas interviews to do interviews, to conduct evaluations in a verbal fashion, but then to save time on the written side, we are adopting AI. And I think that's something that is important, especially if you're going to allow AI for healthcare to enter the workforce. The evaluations have to be done very, very carefully for these sensitive sectors. Okay? So those are 3 recommendations for today's workforce. When it comes to the university setting or the college setting, I think this quote from the founder CEO of NVIDIA says it all, which is English is the new programming language, right? And that's something that we need to kind of make sure that students are able to do well, right? So the fourth recommendation, or the first in the case of university, but fourth overall, is that we want to make sure that we have something called an AI lab for every college-going student, where they are trained in something which is independent of what they are learning, whether they are learning science, whether they are learning commerce, whether they are learning business, whether they are learning accounts. The AI labs is something that allows them to learn how to interact with today's AI systems well, right? This is what is being called prompt engineering, right? And perhaps do this under the guidance of experts. So that's the first recommendation for university students, saying create an AI lab, which is basically a structured way for students to learn how to interact with these tools. The next thing is something that we have done at the university, which is create a multi-dimensional AI learning structure. I showed you the 4 levels of AI hierarchy. And the way we have incorporated that in the formal education sector is that, of course, we have a major in artificial intelligence. So students who want to develop new AI systems major in AI. But we also have a minor in artificial intelligence. And students who are majoring in life science, students who are majoring in energy science, students who are majoring in sustainable entrepreneurship are also doing a minor in AI. We also offer certificates and diplomas and AI for X kind of plans. So many, many varieties in how AI is woven into the education syllabus is the way to go, right? The last one is, as I said, you cannot really do anything without involving the teachers or the educators. So it is important to first train the trainers, which means train the workforce, but in this case, interpret workforce as the professors who are teaching your university students. So teacher capacity building using workshops, using events where they work with the researchers to kind of understand what this technology is and create structured programs on how they can help their students learn AI. Right? So that's the second set. The last set is the school students. Now, when it comes to school students, this is a statistic which kind of makes you sit up and take notice that 65% of students who are entering school today will work in professions which do not exist, which basically means you have to fundamentally rethink what we are teaching them. And here, the policy recommendations might seem counterintuitive. The first policy recommendation is do not allow AI to enter the classroom before class 5th, right? It actually harms. It harms students. It makes them less productive, less critical thinking. In fact, there is work to show that you should not even allow screens or digital technology into the classroom for more than 30 minutes a day. So the first 5 years, do not allow digital technology to enter the classrooms. When it comes grade 6 to 8, the policy recommendation that we are going with is that start introducing this AI, but in a structured way and also in a supervised way under the students, right? Um, and the last one is that by the time these students get to grade 9 to 12, it's really hard to prevent them from using AI. So in this case, make sure that you have evaluations built in which are AI free. So you have to have evaluations where we are not allowing the students to use AI. This is important to make sure that they are able to think critically, they are able to think independently, and they are able to solve problems. All right, so this is the last one, and I will finish with this, that if you have to become a truly AI cognitive nation, it's not just sufficient to teach AI tools. You have to do it in a sequence. You have to help students learn where the AI can make mistake and how to override it if needed, right? So where do we go from here? 10 recommendations are something that I shared with you today. Uh, as I said, this policy is changing very, very fast. So make sure that, and I reserve the right that if I am here 1 year or 2 years down the line, I reserve the right to say what I said was wrong, and we have to come up with new sets of policies, right? You have to maintain balance between innovations and safeguarding interests. And the best way to do this is to kind of have a panel which reviews this every 6 months, right? Uh, so today, this is a summary. AI is good. It's getting better. We need to prepare for this, and the time is now. I will stop here, and if you have any questions, I can take one, or maybe I'll stop.